So I don't know about you, but it was a tough week this week. This last week, I should say. I really went through a few days where it's almost like your whole life and your perspective and your trajectory, everything changes and you feel like you're upside down. You're upside down and you're hanging on nothing but air. And so I traversed through two very, very, very intense days. And the thing is that I feel fortunate enough to have enough experience to know myself well enough to know that I will pass through it. It's like one of my dearest friends always says to me, Corinne, I never worry about you because you move through things so quickly. And I think that's a testament to my ability to stay present and to really feel, as uncomfortable as it is, to really feel and go through the motions and emotions of when we're in tough places. So today I want to talk about, what do you do when you're not okay? What do you do when you don't feel okay? What do you do when you feel like your life has been turned upside down and you can't make any sense of it and you feel unsupported and you have no kind of solution in sight? What do you do? Because I think this is no stranger to the collective as a whole. I think we're moving through very intense times, and there's always the ebb and flow, as I spoke about recently. So you can go through patches where it feels really beautiful and expansive, and then patches that are hard, that are a struggle. And for some, they really get hit hard by it. So I also want to normalize this kind of ebb and flow. But to help you, through my own experience, traverse the sometimes very bumpy terrain. So we're going to look at, what do we do when we don't feel okay? How do we move through that and trust, because it really is an element of trust, that we're going to get through to the other side. So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So I'm going to start off right off the bat to say, I wish I could wave a magic wand and give you just the one solution that will make you feel okay when you don't feel okay. But I don't think that it exists in that kind of pop a pill version that our society likes. However, with that said, it's not to take away the optimism, because if you know me well enough now, you know that I'm really an advocate for all of this, like all of the work that you're doing. And I put work in kind of quotations, right? Because it shouldn't feel like work. Sometimes it takes effort, but all of this awareness that you're cultivating and the language that you're learning about yourself and who you are, not just as a person and a personality, but the essence of who you truly are as a soul and infinite being. All of this like excavation and exploration and discovery is so that when times are hard, you know how to be with yourself. To me, that is the answer to the question of, what do we do? We have to learn, how can I be with myself? Because it's not there, okay, hold on. Let me back up a second. The issue with the way that we currently look at it through society's eyes is that there's a problem and the problem needs to be fixed, and there should be a one-button solution to fixing that problem, right? And that entire paradigm and perspective of thinking is not, it's not based in any kind of reality. And if anything, it actually becomes really detrimental, because if we feel like we aren't doing that, then we feel like something is wrong with us. So that whole way of thinking needs to be thrown out the window, because firstly, it's not a problem. You're having a human experience, and sometimes your human experience is going to be challenging, painful, uncomfortable. Second, because it's not a problem, it doesn't need fixing, right? You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your humanity and what you're feeling, no matter how hard or painful or devastating it is, right? So it doesn't need fixing. It needs being with. It needs loving attention. It needs presence. It needs presence. That's it, So, and with that, within that presence, it's also allowing for whatever you're processing to be processed in the time that it needs to be processed. So that's moving away from the one button or the one pill fix or the immediacy that I don't like this, it needs to be fixed and I need it to be better now and I need to not feel the pain and let's numb it out and move on, right? If that's the way that kind of society perceives things right now, that is so counterintuitive to what our being actually requires in order to process things. So then what happens is we set up this expectation of I shouldn't be feeling like this, or I'm actually in judgment because I'm viewing it through the lens of this is a problem that needs to be fixed. I can't fix it. I can't get rid of it. It's not changing. It's not immediately getting better. And so then that reaffirms that something must be wrong with you because you're not able to do it the way that society is telling you should do it. But how they're telling you to do it just doesn't work, right? So as I've been talking a lot about is all of this that we're going through right now is about redefining and letting go, like really letting crumble the paradigms that no longer serve us and that are just kind of delusional, really. And instead of looking at from a very logical left brain fix it perspective, we want to look at everything holistically. We want to look at it through the perspective of being human. We are not robots, right? And God forbid that we move in that direction where humans become more like robots. I hope that we're moving in the other direction where we're actually wanting to reach more towards our true innate nature and nature itself around us and all that's like beautiful and magical and cosmic and synchronistic and all of these things, right? So that is a big fundamental part of being okay with not being okay, is that we have to let go of that perspective that your humanity is a problem. Okay, so I just want to put that there because if that isn't sorted in a way, then the rest becomes really difficult because you're still seeing through the filter of this is a problem that needs to be fixed and it needs to be fixed very quickly. And actually what that does is very counterproductive because there might be an appearance of a quick fix and a quick solution, but actually really what's happening is suppression. And there is no way. At some point that's going to come up to the surface, right? So from my own experience, what I've learned is just that those days, those phases that you move through that are so uncomfortable, where for me, it wasn't even just about the physical discomfort. I've gotten quite good at just being with that because again, this is a process over time, doing it again and again and again and again of not self-abandoning, not self-rejecting, not judging, not distracting, not numbing. Like that is a process and that might take years. That might take years. And you might think, oh my God, Corinne, that's too long. I can't do that. But what's the outcome if you don't practice, right? The outcome if you don't practice this, even if it takes you a decade, is you're going to have a lifetime where you feel at the mercy of your changing states of emotions and being and thoughts and all of that stuff. It means that you're going to have a lifetime of this kind of imprisonment because that's what it is. And what I'm here to do is to support you in liberating yourself from unnecessary suffering. And so it's kind of, I don't like this term, but it's like short-term pain for long-term gain, right? I don't like those words, but you get the gist of what I'm trying to say here. So it just takes persistence. And as I've shared, what I feel so grateful for that I began in my 20s And now in my 40s, I'm like, thank you. Thank you, former Corinne, for moving through that. And, I have to say my 20s were like, whew, I learned a lot of this stuff in my 20s, and my physical injury that I had that took me away from being a professional ballet dancer taught me so much about actually being with pain. And learning how to really be with physical pain taught me simultaneously how to really be with emotional pain, because pain is pain, right? The brain can't even really decipher whether it's physical or emotional, sometimes whether it's real or not real, right? Because the brain can also project. And when we redefine what pain is, then things that ordinarily would be painful aren't as painful, aka my birthing experience. I wouldn't describe it as painful. Intense, yes, but not painful. So again, the power of the mind, the power of belief, the power of perception, everything is perception. You've heard me say this before. So over these last 2 decades, learning to just sit in the fire is what I like to say. It's like sit in the fire of it. So, as these feelings, the emotions came up, I hadn't slept in days. I'm suffering from the amount of noise where I'm living. There's a sewage problem in this apartment, so it can just smell like a toilet, which is really disgusting. Sorry to bring that into your consciousness. But so many things in my physical environment, and then the lack of sleep, which will just make you feel crazy anyway, was pushing me to the brink of just kind of feeling like I was going to have a nervous breakdown. And, when we reach those moments of stress where we feel like we're going to snap, it's accumulation. It's always accumulation. Now, I was dealing already, I was walking around my house with earplugs and noise-canceling earphones because that's how bad the noise was. And, when you're tired and when you're already feeling sensitive to sound, the sound gets louder, right? Everything becomes louder. Everything intensifies. And so, I was having to just be with the physical reality that, God, this is so intense. And I could physically really feel it, like just the strain and the overload and the overstimulation and the fatigue, like absolutely fatigued and exhausted. And, even though so many things to be grateful for and so many wonderful adventures, there is a part of me that is absolutely exhausted because I don't have any proper ground beneath my feet still. I've really been learning how to walk in thin air this year. But here's where there's the unnecessary suffering. And I caught myself in it and I was aware of it. But this is part of based on the theme of how can you be okay when you're not okay, is pay attention to how you go into a story. And you've heard me talk about this before, but I need to bring it up because that's what happens, is that we sweep everything into it, right? So when you're feeling like the spiraling down, and what got me, what was the trigger was I felt totally abandoned by the universe. I was like, God, I've put so much out and nothing is coming back. And it actually feels like my physical surrounding is getting worse. It's like it's almost pushing me out of here, but there's no solution. There's no stepping stone. There's nothing to reach for next. And so it's really like, what the hell? What am I meant to be doing? And so then I have to completely refocus and be like, well, do I have to leave this place that I thought was home? And I don't mean just the apartment, but the geographical location. Do I need to start researching an entirely different area? I mean, there's a housing crisis kind of no matter where you go. So that's part of the issue here is there's hundreds, if not thousands of people looking for housing. And anyway, I think a lot of people are experiencing this right now. And it's an interesting metaphor, right? Just on a side note, as it just came up as I'm speaking now, what an interesting metaphor, because I do feel that through these shifts, we are looking for home, and many people are feeling homeless. Some people are physically homeless. And so it's just interesting that this topic of home is really coming in because there's this disruption. There's this kind of, you got to get really uncomfortable so that actually you recognize that the true home is within yourself. And the true home, that when you come to that place of home within yourself, that opens up to your greater home, which is source, right? And the true safety and the true peace and the true connection and whatever it is that we're seeking lies in that place. So from a metaphoric perspective, it kind of makes sense that for many right now, there is this disruption. There is this shaking. In some places they're having earthquakes, or they're having hurricanes, and they're having floods. And, if you're not dealing with kind of natural quote unquote disasters, or maybe you're just in the housing crisis as well, or whatever it is, it's just an interesting theme, right? And when we're in times of crisis, there has to be a digging in. There has to be a turning towards ourselves, because that might actually be all that you have. That and the clothes on your back, and hopefully the family and community around you. What ends up being the most important thing in these times is connection and heart and love and community and support. And those are the things that give us the resilience and the stamina. And that's really what I was coming up against last week. It's just, I was like, I don't have the stamina anymore. And then the thing is, but here's the thing. And we can take comfort in this. We will always get through. We will always get through, no matter how long it might take to move through the kind of dark night of the soul, whether it's a day or 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years. We will come through to the other side. We will. It's very rare that a state stays the same forever, because the only constant in life is change. And, I do really, really believe that we move through things quicker the more that we're really in it, feeling it, aware with it, conscious with it, right? Not like colluding with it and going into the story of it and making it worse. So coming back to that point, when we go into the story, I found myself going into like, God, Corinne, you've made some terrible choices in your life, and this is not where I thought I was going to be at this point. And, even the last 6, 7, 8 months, everything that I've been envisioning, only one of those things has come true, and it's around my daughter, which I'm very pleased about, but like none of the other aspects. And I'm normally a very, very good manifester. And there's a whole thing around that, which you've heard me talking about, where I really feel there's like almost like this kind of net, or the rules have changed, or something is coming in as an obstacle. But, that whole story, thankfully, I am able to observe it. I'm able to observe it come out in real time, even like leaving messages, voice messages for, a dear friend of mine. I was completely like, oh yeah, Corinne, you're going into that whole narrative, and you're going into the kind of the judgment and the victimization. And I'm super, super aware of it. And a part of me is kind of like, without any judgment, because our higher self has no judgment, but this kind of intrigue of like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, that's where you're going right now. And you know that there's no point to that, right? But that's okay. Play it out. Play it out. And so I did play it out. And sometimes, you know what? We need to just go through that. We need to like hash it out. But part of being okay with not being okay is not, it's the attachment. It's the identification. It's the holding on to, and therefore I am unworthy, or I am a failure. And I actually caught myself at one point saying, I've utterly failed. I've utterly failed in this life. I've failed my potential. But I also could hear my higher self in that moment lovingly calling bullshit on that. Of like, no, because you can't fail. My human self, or whatever, I don't even need to categorize it as anything. A part of me, did feel, God, I've really failed my mission here. But then I do these little videos on social media, and now on YouTube too, where, I just talked to camera, and I had a video where, I was tired, I hadn't slept, I had no makeup on, my eyes were puffy because I had been crying. And, It's like, yeah, this is what I'm going through. And if there is one purpose that I feel I have in this life is to just be as authentic as possible and to share that with y'all so that it's okay to be you, and that it just that whatever you're moving through, it's okay. Welcome to the human show. Welcome to the human experience. And if I can be an example of that, of like, this is what I look like when I'm not okay. This is what I look like when I'm tired. This is what I look like when I'm on the brink of a nervous breakdown. This is what I look like when I don't know what the solution is. This is what I look like when, whatever. Here I am. Here I am. This is me in this moment. And for me, I ask the question, if you've worked with me, can it be okay? And so the peace that I feel, even when it feels so shitty, is, can it be okay? Yeah, it can be okay. I don't like it. It's hard. It's uncomfortable. How am I, what's going to happen out of this? Even my experience of really feeling abandoned with the universe, I got to this point, which is, it's actually quite an interesting one. And I've reached this many, many, many times in my life. And I've actually made the decision, we'll see if I can stick to it as far as the, terminology. I don't want to pray to the universe anymore. And there's many reasons for it. One is I actually feel it's too small. I don't think that that's the vastest thing in creation. I think it's just an aspect of creation, so it feels too small to pray to. Two, and this, I've come into this, I've faced this so many times. It's like, Corinne, why are you praying to something outside of yourself that you feel like you are sometimes at the mercy of? I do believe that there is something greater than us, which is source, creator of all that is, which we are a part of. We are a drop of that waterfall, you could say. And I do believe that when you have a relationship to something that is, and I'm going to really make this I'm going to distinctly describe this. When I say that there is something greater than me or you or us, I don't mean that it's separate from us and that I don't look at it as a hierarchical authority-like figure that we are, cowering down to, which sometimes religion depicts God as, right? God will be wrathful and punish you if you do wrong by him. I do think feeling into some kind of omnipresence helps us to expand into what we truly are and to not take the minutia of everything that is going on so seriously. I do think having that, it gives us that sense of awe and wonder of the absolute divinity and sacredness that is around us and within us and weaves itself through all of creation. I think actually without that, there was this woman, was it Kelly or Carrie? I forget her name, that I had mentioned it several episodes ago about a documentary on YouTube. And, she was saying that one of the biggest kind of lies that we've faced as a humanity is that that kind of divinity doesn't exist. That we've gone so much into the logical and rational that we don't believe in any of that. And that actually has been the most detrimental to humanity. And I found that so fascinating. And it's not about delusion. It's not about some being will save us. I think that's still playing the old paradigm of being spiritual children, but that there's some larger entity that is weaving itself through. Now, the other day I had the most beautiful experience going to see Veda Austin. And if you don't know her work, I really highly recommend that you check it out. She does amazing work around water. And for me, this is just my opinion. And of course, this has come up in the conversation. And, I'm not the first one to say this because she brought it up. Other people have brought it up. It's not a question if water has consciousness. It appeared to me that it is consciousness, that it is God. And actually, there's a beautiful passage of writing that says something along well, if God was water, then then God is always within us, around us. I mean, it's you could Google it. I don't know it word for word, but it's such a beautiful passage because again, it just shows that like we are a part of that. And when I went to that her talk, Veda Austin's talk, I had so many synchronicities. I had so many wild synchronicities. I had the most kind of wonderful experience of really trusting my intuition. And these things are so fun to play with because those are the moments where you realize you're in relationship with something. Now, what was lovely for me is it wasn't like I wasn't going to the universe. I was actually going to my higher self. Like after the talk, she went away for a little bit and she was going to come back to do a book signing, or if you wanted to just have a hug and a picture with her. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and it was taking a really long time, and I really wanted to get back home. So I was kind of like, oh, I wonder if I should go, but I wasn't getting any kind of clear answers. So I just thought, okay, I'm gonna just wait. When there's doubt, don't. So I just waited, and then I had a moment where I was gonna go, but 3 other women all of a sudden looked at their watch, and it was clear that they were done waiting, and so they got up and left. And I thought, no, I'm not gonna go now because what I really wanted was to walk out into the hall and go down the stairwell on my own and run into Veda. So I could just have a quick, brief chat without having to wait in line. Selfishly. And so I just was having this internal conversation with myself. So I was just staying there. I was like, okay, I wasn't getting the cue. I was kind of waiting for a cue. I wasn't getting it. And then all of a sudden, after some minutes had passed, I just had this feeling of like, okay, it's time to go now. And I had made peace with the fact that, maybe I won't cross paths with her and I won't get the hug and the photo and to be able to connect with her. But there was deep down this part of me that's like, you're going to run into her in the stairwell. Lo and behold, I'm walking out and I'm walking down the stairs by myself and I ran into her and I have just the most beautiful little exchange. And wow, she gives the most loving hugs you'll ever receive from a quote unquote stranger. What a beautiful, beautiful soul she is. And it was like, there you go. So all of it just takes listening, right? Listening in and being in conversation with ourselves. So sometimes I think the gift of kind of being at war with the universe, or just having those moments where you want to give it the middle finger and be like, where are you? You're just completely abandoning me. Everything that I visioned and I'm calling in and I'm wanting to manifest and I'm putting my heart into, and, you get to that point where you're like, screw you. This isn't a reciprocal relationship. The gift of that is you stop handing over your power even to something like the universe and you come back to yourself. And I'm like, right, this is a relationship between me and my higher self, my oversoul, because that I genuinely do believe in. And I also still in those moments of being in darkness do believe that there is the source of all that is, the creator of all that is, whatever we want to call that. And I think it actually doesn't have a name. It doesn't have one name because it's an energy, it's a consciousness, without words, right? And this weaves into how we are shifting into, the age of Aquarius, if you want to call it, of really coming into our own individuality, and how coming into our own individuality and sovereignty helps us actually to create to a greater sense of unity and connection to source. I talked about this before. So when you feel abandoned by life, when you feel like, it doesn't have your back, it becomes so important to recognize, but are you there with and for yourself? And when I say that, I don't mean that kind of defensive, armored, like, it's just me. I can only depend on me. Nothing else is going to make this better. The only person I have in this life is me, and then everything else gets like all of the armor and the alarms sound, and you go into like bunker mode. That's not what I mean. What I mean is this very spacious, expansive, gentle, soft, loving presence that comes from within yourself that says, I am here with you, for you, traversing this with you, right? I'm here behind you, beside you. I'm holding you, whether it's your hand or embracing you. I'm here. I'm here to even listen. Just listen. And I've been playing with this kind of conversation. What was going on the other night where my human self was like, just like everything was going wrong. It was just a day where it was actually really terrible. And by the end of it, I just felt so traumatized from the day because it was just one thing after the next, after the next, after the next. And it was like, ended with nearly getting a parking ticket and then being stopped by the police, which triggers all sorts of things. And then I don't know what, like something had either spilt or had stubbed my toe or something. I think I'd spilt something and I was hoovering it up. And so my human was just like, screw this sucks. And, la, la, la. And I could really feel my higher self being like, yeah, I really get it. I really get it. Like, this sucks. This just, and it was, I think I spoke to this a little bit last week. It's just allowing that part to express itself and to be seen. And the moment it's seen, it doesn't have to keep on reeling out the story. It's like, oh, wow, you see me and you hear me and you understand me right now. And that's what makes us feel connected. That's what makes us feel like we're not alone. Because sometimes when we feel really unseen, unheard, misunderstood, we feel very disconnected and we feel very alone. And so then we push to fight a little bit more. We push to prove our point a little bit more. We push to go into reel the story again and again and again of like how terrible it is, because what we're really seeking is that kind of feeling of, I see you, I'm witnessing you in this moment, and I totally understand how and why you would feel like that. There's a relief in that. And so this is why we cannot look at it as a problem that needs to be fixed, because there's inherently judgment in that. What that's saying to us is what you're feeling, thinking, experiencing right now is not okay. It's wrong and you shouldn't be. And so that means something bad about you. And so then you're in the suffering alone. And you go into the story of like, well, why is something so wrong with me? Why am I designed in such a flawed way that I'm experiencing this when I shouldn't? And when it's like, welcome to being human. Just welcome to being human. So when you're going through it and you don't feel okay and you're reeling into the story of it, can you have that higher part of you that is observing and witnessing just there? Like in the telepathic communication, or it could be out loud. You could be talking to yourself out loud. It doesn't matter. There's no right way. But you're having this conversation where you are being witnessed, and then recognize how the human part of you gets to relax. Now, there's also the responsibility of like, don't indulge and collude and go into the kind of indolence of it all, right? Express it. But then also the moment that you feel heard, exhale, right? Some people get addicted to the victimization, get addicted to the drama. And then guess what? It's going to take us so long to move through whatever we're moving through. And that's when we think it's just like something is inherently wrong with us and nothing is going to change and life sucks. And that's the victim that doesn't want to let go. The victim always needs a problem. The victim always needs a source of suffering. Right? So if you find yourself going, life is constantly handing me shit, recognize that probably what role and identity is being played through that is the victim. And you know what? You might have to move through that, because I certainly did. I have a very kind of comical relationship with one of my dearest friends, and we can, both going through something, but we always can find a source of humor. And I think that's so important that, even amidst just I was like wailing at some point. I was sitting in my car just crying, being like, what the hell? Like, I can't take this anymore. I really can't. And then something kind of came through, and there was just the ability to find humor in the shit, of like being handed shit. I think my friend was saying she was in a library. She said to me, the guy next to me just farted, and I said, "Look, there's the universe just handing you shit in air form because it can't plop a poop right on your lap in the middle of the library." And it's like I was able to crack myself up in that moment. So my God, humor can be such a lifeline, Another lifeline can be when we are of service to other people, not as a means to like, if I'm of service to other people, then that validates me and therefore I am a good person and therefore I'm valuable and worthy. But when we genuinely are of service to people, that uplifts us. So she was going through something, and, I just had this kind of like whoosh of, something that kind of channeled through me. And, I shared that with her, and she was like, "Thank you. You're so right about that." And I'll briefly share not exactly everything that I said because I wouldn't even be able to remember it, but we have this tremendous pressure. This is going to seem like a tangent, but it all fits in somehow. We have this tremendous pressure that we put on ourselves to feel like we have to produce something in the world. And especially if you're creative or artistic, you think that you have to create something and it needs to be successful, right? And if it's not successful, the creation feels like a failure. And so basically what I was saying is that, that is a societal, it's a societal construct, because I think all we're ever being asked to do is just to be who we authentically are and to be in the expression, the spontaneous, inspired expression of our joy. So if it makes you feel joyful to write a book that you might not ever publish, or to paint a painting that you might not ever sell, or maybe you do and it just goes into somebody's like little home, or maybe you write a book and 2 people read it, it doesn't matter. Our only job is to be present to the inspiration that is coming through us, to be in the joyful expression of that, and then let it go. It's society that says you need to produce something that is successful. You need to have an award for that. You need to have some kind of accolade to prove that that was deemed worthy, when actually none of that mattered. There's nothing that needs to be measured. We live in a measuring society. And guess what? In a measured society, you will always fall short because it's based on you're not good enough. You're never enough. You'll never reach the bar. You've won 10 gold medals at the Olympic. Well, why don't you have 20? Oh, you have 1 million. Why don't you have 10 million? Why don't you have 1 billion? Why don't you have 1 trillion? Oh, you have 5 houses. Why don't you have 10? You see what I mean? It's never enough. It's never enough. And you can actually even feel that in the spiritual community and the self-improvement, community. It can still breed that it's never enough. You're not pure enough. You're not holy enough. You're not spiritual enough. You're never whatever bullshit enough. And this is what we're stepping away from. This is what we're literally just leaving in the past because it doesn't serve us. It creates pain, suffering, and imprisonment. So if you are measuring yourself at any point, most especially when you don't feel okay, can you recognize, like what I invite you to do in that moment is go, oh, this is society's expectation of me right now that I feel like I'm falling short of. Can I let go of it? It's not true. It's an illusion. It's false. When I say illusion, it can still feel very real. I'm not, I can't stand the spiritual bypassing, because the reality is like, even if this is a hologram and a simulation, it still feels damn real. So let's be in it with our feet on the ground, right? We're learning something through this simulation. We're learning something through this, holographic experience. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it is that or if it isn't that. The point is we're here having an experience. You can't get out of it. And so the biggest question is, how do I want to be in this and move through this in the most peaceful, loving, kind, respectful way to myself and to others? The rest doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter, right? So, take a breath. I think we need to remember to breathe. We need to remember to have those still points where we come to just, that 0 point again in order to recalibrate. And what that invites us into is the present moment, which is all that we ever really have. So the invitation for today, I feel like I'm going to say the same thing every time, but it just is the repetition. And it's so simple. But can you be with yourself with presence and without judgment? I know I talked about that last week. I'm sure I'll talk about it again next week. But if you ask me what helps me to be okay when I don't feel okay, it's getting out of the judgment. So I'm just going to point out that, let's say, the little toolbox that you can use. Okay, so one is don't resist your experience. No matter how shitty it feels, try not to resist it. Try to breathe into it. Breath is an amazing catalyst for it, right? Amazing container. Second is notice if you're judging yourself. Notice if you're going into a story that you're getting caught up and caught away with, right? Bring yourself back. 3, make sure you have loving friends around you that are not going to judge you, that you feel safe, even if it's one. And if you don't have that, then get some kind of support if you can, some kind of external professional support, whether it's like a coach, like someone like me, or a therapist, or whatever it is. But sometimes we do need that kind of external support. We need, we're relating social creatures, right? And so just knowing that we have a network, not out of codependency, but interdependency, and knowing that we do have a physical network around us that can support us when we go through hard times. Another one is get yourself into nature. Get yourself into nature. Like yesterday, I finally was able to find actually a quiet place, which is very hard to do where I am because it's just so busy. But what that did for my nervous system was just so incredibly soothing, because sometimes actually we can get spun really tight into kind of the, nervous system overload, sensory overload. We can be stuck in our own thoughts and emotions and go even into you might go into panic, you might go into anxiety, you might go into all of these things. And having nature just recalibrate us and putting our feet on the earth, our body on the earth, literally will change our magnetic field. And sometimes we really, really need that support. So even if you live in the middle of the city, go to a park, take your shoes off and put your feet on the ground. Ground yourself. There's no way that it won't not help you, even in the smallest of ways. But I will always invite you to come back into this practice that becomes a daily practice, is be with yourself. That's why I don't like to call it meditation anymore. Take time every morning or evening, but I like the mornings because it really sets you up for the day, to be with yourself, whether it's 2 minutes or 5 minutes or half an hour. Make it doable so that it's not something that you measure yourself up to again, but it's like literally, this is a checking in. This is a being with myself. And then the more that you build that, you cultivate that awareness with yourself in a kind of a neutral state. This is you building your awareness and cultivating the language of who you are. How do I feel? How do I feel at neutral? How do I feel at depletion? How do I feel when I'm like doing great? You really can understand the changes in the energetic state. And so that when that certain energy comes in, you're like, oh, right, yeah, I can feel I'm in depletion. Then okay, what do I need? That's the next thing. What do I need? And then the things that you need to do for you personally that will help you with that. So for me, it's to go to the sea. For some, it might be to go to the mountain. For another, it might go to the forest. For the other, it might be go into the art studio and paint. For another, it might be go to an ecstatic dance session. For whatever it is for you, know your things that nourish, nurture, and ground you. So this is a combination of the internal the external and the surrounding. So what I mean by that is the internal is you need to look at your internal state of being. What do you need in order to be with your own feelings, thoughts, experience without judgment, without resistance, so that you can just relax into it? The external is what environment do you need to place yourself in that can support you in coming into that internal space that is in harmony, which doesn't mean happiness and positivity, but in harmony with even the pain, right? And the suffering and the discomfort and the challenge. The surrounding is who's your network? Even if it's one person, but who's your support network? And all of these, we got to look at everything in a holistic view, right? Not compartmentalized, but all of this is we're looking at this holistically to understand what do I need to support myself in this human experience? And anytime you get into the shoulds and the shouldn'ts, write them down. And on top of that, write society's expectations of me. And you write down all the shoulds and shouldn'ts, and you recognize it's an illusion. And you get to choose to let go of those things. All you're ever being asked to do is be with your experience with love. That's it. And the more that you can be with it, you will move through it. And eventually you do it so many times, like I have, that you just have this knowing, a part of you has this knowing that you will get through it. And then it's not as bad, because I think what becomes so scary is you feel it's going to be like this forever. And, for me, honestly, right now, I don't have the solution. I'm kind of feeling like I have 6 days until I have to pay rent again, and I don't want to do another month of this. So I'm kind of like, I have 6 days and I don't know what the solution is going to be, but I have to trust it. We are trusting the unseen right now on epic levels. We are being lovingly pushed. I'm going to say lovingly because God, let's hope so, pushed into such an extreme state of surrender and trust. We're learning how to see in the dark. We're learning how to dance in the dark. But you can take comfort in knowing that we're doing it together. We're in it together. You're not alone. We're doing this as a collective, even though the individual story can feel so intense and sometimes very lonely. You're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. It's all okay. And just know that others are going through a same but different experience, Same experience, different story maybe. So take heart, rest into that. And know that you are completely capable. Even when you don't feel like you're capable, you are completely capable of doing this. Because guess what? No matter how hard stuff like that we've experienced already in our life, guess what? We're all still here, right? I mean, there are times where I'm sure you've had the experience where you're like, I can't take this anymore. I'm going to die. But guess what? We're still here. For better or worse, we're still here. You will always get through it. And what we're doing here in this conversation is we're learning how to get through it with just a little bit more ease, with a little bit more grace. Not because there's a right or wrong way to do it, but we're learning how to move through the hard times with gentleness, with presence, without abandoning ourselves. We've spent thousands of years abandoning and rejecting, and we're bringing it all back in, coming back home to ourselves and letting ourselves know that we are okay and we are enough, and we're so much more than enough, actually. So that's the message for today. You're always going to be okay, even when you're not okay. You are a resilient, mighty, powerful, beautiful being and creation. Do not forget who you are. Do not hand your power over to someone or something that makes you feel small. Bring yourself into the circle of those that lift you by allowing and accepting you to be you too. Right? Like attracts like in that way. And I don't even want to say like attracts like. It's just like what you want to be in and what you want to create, bring those people towards you. Build it and they shall come, right? All right, I'm going to leave it at that. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.